You're watching The Edward Fowler Show. Now, here's your host, Edward Fowler.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for tuning in tonight on this lovely Tuesday evening. I hope it's lovely where you are. And I am joined tonight by a blues guitarist / singer / songwriter who has been blowing up with his amazing albums and all other exciting projects over the past years. And it's a pleasure to have on tonight my guest joining us remotely, Dan. How are you? Welcome to my show tonight.
I suppose even better for being on your show. Thank you for the invite.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for accepting to come on the show because I know your people reached out to me, so it was quite nice for change. So I thought, why not?
Brilliant, man. We're so glad to be with you this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. So you know you're quite a busy person at the moment, aren't you? Because you know you're currently on tour, and I know you're coming over to the UK / the EU later. Well, in about 2 weeks, I guess now, because it's almost that time. Are you looking forward to coming back over to perform in the UK / the EU?
Always, Edward. I mean, I always find it a very, very special treat playing for, UK audiences. I mean, this tour is predominantly the UK. We're doing, the very, very last shows in Hungary and Budapest. But yeah, it's always a special thing for me returning to the UK. Playing for what I believe to be a very, very educated audience within the blues, and it's always really a privilege to play for such people.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because I feel like we're very passionate people, especially in the UK. We love our music, and when I got the chance to listen to your music as well, it gives off a good vibe as well. It's like your typical blues type of music. It's more jazzy and more wacky as well. So there's a lot of different things going on, and I think that's why people can relate to your music a lot more than other artists out there, which is great to see.
Well, thank you, man. I mean, I think it's always just been a case of trying to merge and marry a bunch of influences together. I mean, the blues is ultimately my first love, and probably always will be. Mm-hmm. But it's not my only love. I love a great rock song, particular jazz, particular country, a whole kind of, I suppose, gumbo of different genres. And when I try and write, I try not pigeonhole myself into saying I'm writing a blues tune, or I'm writing a country tune, or I'm writing this. I just try and write, and whatever comes through. And because I listen to quite, a vast array of genres, you tend to have some interesting stuff kind of pop in. And I'm very, very glad that is, that comes through on the record. It's great.
No, it absolutely does. And we will get to your latest album, which you released at the start of this month, in a few moments. But I want to give a quick reference to everybody who may want to see this amazing tour in progress, because of course you're coming to Manchester, UK to kick it all off on April the 5th, which will be good to see, because it's unusual to see a lot of artists starting their tour in Manchester, so it's nice that you decided to do so we really appreciate that from someone who lives in Manchester. So you're going to be at the Deaf Institute on April the 5th, and then of course on the 6th you'll be up in Newcastle, then on the 7th in Glasgow, the 10th to Cardiff, then Wolverhampton on the 11th, then Brighton on the 12th, and London on the 13th, and Southampton on the 16th, and of course, as you mentioned before, ending in Europe, and that's going to be a great time for you. But you got some back-to-back shows at the start of April. You're going to be a bit jet-lagged with all the singing, I guess.
Well, you know what? The great thing is with Edward, because I'm coming from South Africa, I think there's only a two-hour difference, so there's not much jet lag. So I've made a point this time to fly in a couple days earlier, just to kind of get over that initial, exhaustion from traveling and kind of just acclimatize a little bit. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge generally for me on a tour like this, where the dates are quite back to back, is keeping the voice
Mm.
alive. The guitar playing's is easy. That can go as many nights as you want. It's just the voice tends to, you got to really be careful, and you really got to kind of, I suppose treat it well is probably the best way to, kind of put it. Like during the course of the tour, and really rest in the day. And that's always my biggest fear of a tour with a lot of back-to-back dates, is just the voice going, or something like that. Luckily, I've come close to losing my voice in the past on tours, but I've never quite been there. It's a very, very scary thing when you get close to, your voice completely burning out, because, if your voice burns out, you kind of have to cancel the show, and that would just be, an absolutely colossal crying shame.
Yeah, disaster for sure. So how is your prep going then to make sure your voice is going to be strong enough for the entire back-to-back shows, especially because I know you got a few that I mentioned, especially around the UK.
Well, funnily enough, I think a lot of people think that, your voice is the strongest at the beginning of a tour because it's fresh, you haven't sung in a while. But I find, if I haven't sung in a while, I find my voice really almost goes into a little bit of a shock when I start singing night after night.
Hmm.
And it almost, you kind of got to acclimatize the voice to doing that every night again. So a big part of what we've done now, I'm currently on a South African, well, I've just finished a South African national tour, which with also a lot of back-to-back dates, a lot
Yeah.
of traveling. And I think that was the best thing I could possibly do, before I head to the UK, because I mean, I fly in about a week's time to the UK, is because my voice is now almost acclimatized, and I feel is somewhat fit to tour again. But at the beginning of the South African tour, it was tough, man. It was a tough innings on the voice, just because I haven't sung in so many months, like properly, that it took a good few shows just to kind of settle. So it's great. I got a week off now of no shows, and then we head back into, obviously playing in the UK. So I think that's the best way to prep for a tour, in my opinion.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. And speaking of your tour in South Africa, and as I know you just finished one, and we showed the graphic for your tour there, especially the South African one. How was it? How did the fans in South Africa react to your latest tour? Did they enjoy it as much as the last one you did?
Yes, it was fantastic, man. Probably one of the best tours I've done yet. I think for many, many reasons. It's, the songs that we playing. I know we're not chatting about the album quite yet, but the songs on the new album, the songs that we've pushed into this new live set, are songs that I want to play, right? And I know that sounds weird, songs that I want to play, but there's no real too much outside influence of labels saying you have to do this, or managers saying you have to do this, or PR saying you have to do this. These are songs that speak to me, speak to my roots, speak to who I am as a musician. And because that's the case, the live performance of them is 10 times more natural. It's got 10 times more impact, in my opinion. So I think that was a big factor to why the tour has been so successful, and why, audiences I felt have really taken a lot more away from the show than possibly in the past, because it's 100% me up there now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And were there some people maybe disappointed that you didn't bring out some of your throwback songs as well, part of the tour?
Well, I'm pretty sure that I'm sure there's people out there that are definitely disappointed, but no one's actually come to me and said, "Oh, I'm very disappointed you didn't play that song or that song." I mean, obviously we are throwing in a few back catalog songs into the set too, but
Yeah.
obviously the focus is really, really this album. And because the album's so natural, normally for me, when I tour a brand new album, maybe 4 or 5 songs off that new album are playable live, and the rest, kind of never get played, right?
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason. But because of the way this album was recorded, we can play every single track on this album live with ease, and it comes across naturally. So, obviously when doing a set list and coming up with a set list for this tour, and the tour I'm going to be bringing to the UK, it was quite tough to say, well, which back catalogue songs are we going to pop in?
Yeah.
So, no one's complained to my face, at least, at this point, but it seemed to go down super, super well.
Good to hear. And I'm sure when you come over to the UK, I'm sure the fans will be geared up to see what songs you'll be playing as well. But let's mention about the album then, because it came out on the 1st of March 2024. Moving On, and of course it was a great album, of course, and who I am to say as well. Great song for sure. But
thank you.
What was the feedback like from your fans when that was announced? When you announced it on March the 1st, did you expect the reaction it drawn for you, or did it surpass your expectations?
It certainly, I think, one of the crazy things about doing an album, especially an album of this nature, which is, an album I've wanted to really do for the last 10 years, is you spend so much time with the songs, from writing them to arranging them to recording them, and then eventually months later releasing an album. You kind of lose track of what the album is because you've heard it so many times.
Yeah.
And you'll wake up one day and say, this is a really good album, I'm really proud of it, and the next day you'll listen to it and you might be in a different mind frame, and you say, this might be the worst thing that's ever been recorded by in the history of the world, right? Maybe we should can the release. So you lose perspective of what the album is. So the reaction when the album was released on March 1st was absolutely astounding for me. Like, it was this overwhelming positive feedback on this album, and for me that was, I suppose, the best way to describe it was the biggest sense of relief I've ever felt, because you're like, whew, thankfully it's being received, and the point that I wanted to do with the album is getting across, and people are getting the album. And for me, it was more relief than anything when I saw the positive feedback. And to be honest, it's probably the out of any album I've done, it's been the best feedback I've gotten so far, which I am just incredibly grateful for.
That's great. I'm glad that this is exceeded your expectations, and I hope that in the coming months and years to come, this is going to be going in the right direction for you, going higher and higher every time you release a new single or a new album. So all kudos to you. I know that you've got a lot going on in the background behind you as well, which we like to say, because if you're watching this on YouTube, you know what I'm on about. If you're listening to this, I recommend to watch out the video as well, because you can see some great guitars behind you. We can see a lot of wall art as well. Is this the room where all your ideas come to fruition, or is this where you come to not jot down some notes or even do a bit of lyricking?
Yeah, I think all of the above. This is my home. I'm currently sitting in my home studio. I got back from this tour last night, and yeah, as you say, Edward, this is, I do everything from all the admin I've got to do for touring and running a business in the music business, to writing, to practicing, to prepping for tours, writing albums, arranging songs. This is kind of my, the hub or the helm of kind of what I do. And, it's a very small little humble studio. I mean, I couldn't record an album in here.
No.
Set up a drum kit or anything like that, but it's I sing mostly for neighbor purposes, but it's absolutely perfect for my needs, and it's a special place for me. It really is. It's a place that I come in every day. This is like my office, right? And it's a special, very, very creative place for me. As you mentioned, there's a bunch of guitars on the wall behind me, two are missing because those are my two touring guitars that are still in the fly case behind me, because we're fresh off tour. But it really is an inspiring a place to be in. Yeah, a lot of creative juices flow in this room.
Absolutely. And you mentioned about your guitars, two of them missing from the wall. So what were about those two particular ones you thought, I would love to use those ones for the tour? Why not the other three options you got behind you, which I can see on the wall?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a very easy answer. Those three on the wall there have been played, for so many years and so hard that they're completely unplayable now.
Oh.
Unfortunately, it's the red one at the back there is 1962 Strat.
Wow.
That I'm lucky enough to own. I bought in the year 2000, and I played it for so many years. It went through Hurricane Katrina with me when I was living in New Orleans. And it's unfortunately the neck's all twisted and it's just kind of, if I try and fix it, it's just going to kind of ruin the guitar. The Sunburst one behind me is a 1964 Strat, and a similar thing. It's just been played to pieces. It really, really has. Not enough wood left to refret the guitar. Long story on that one. And then the yellow one there was the guitar I've owned the longest. I've owned that since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And that's, for similar reasons, has just become unplayable. So the ones that are in the flight case are two very, very special guitars. They're not vintage guitars, but they are, two of the best Fender Strats I've ever played in my life. But they're just like workhorses, war horses, or whatever you want to call it. That they just play beautifully, and more importantly, they sound incredible, man. They really, really do.
Great story. Sorry to hear about the three guitars behind you. I was going to say, it's a shame you can't get them fixed or get an expert to fix them for you without you having messed it up or make it even worse type thing, and then that's something you don't have to worry about.
You know what it is? It's I could probably get it fixed. That's not the problem, but because they're of such high value. I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly didn't have the money to pay what they were worth, but I was very lucky to find them. But as soon as you start altering them in what they need to be playable again, you can kind of almost like halve the value of the guitars because they've just been kind of messed with.
Gotcha.
So for me, I'm happy for them just to be, very, very fond memories for me that I see every single day when I walk into my studio, that remind me of very, very particular shows and particular times in my life. So it's sad, but I've kind of come to terms with it.
Fair enough. But at least you can, have them have war monuments and have them up there as part of like in a frame or something in the future, maybe as well when you have guests
definitely.
over. Now, I want to know, who originally inspired you to become, as you said at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned about how you've always loved blues as your first love, no matter what. So, how did you actually came across blues, and who inspired you?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I grew up here in South Africa, and obviously, South Africa is not exactly known to be a blues country, right? Where a lot of blues comes out of. I mean, that's probably the last thing you think of when anyone thinks of South Africa. It's more like the Big Five or wildlife or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But my parents were I suppose a big driving factor, and they're not musicians, but they are massive music lovers and listeners, and excuse me, I grew up with access to an extensive music collection from my parents, and a big part of that music collection was the blues, and besides me kind of listening to particular albums and picking an album and giving it a listen kind of based on the album cover, when music was always playing in the house, constantly, on weekends music was always playing. In the car, if we're going down to kind of the seaside on holiday, music was playing. So, and mostly blues once again. So, when I kind of picked up the guitar at probably about, 12 years old, 13 years old, somewhere around there, the blues seemed to be, I suppose, the most natural genre to kind of experiment with, because I grew up listening to it like extensively, and I kind of had this feeling that I knew the music already, and it was more natural.
Yeah.
So I think that was the reason I got into the blues, and then I started listening to particular artists, but at first I was listening to more of the rock side of things. So I think it was more palatable for a young teenager than going and instantly listening to Robert Johnson or Muddy Waters or something like that. So the guy that really inspired me to actually pick up the guitar was David Gilmour, of Pink Floyd. That was, that moment where I decided this is what I want to do. I want to play the guitar because, of what I heard David Gilmour doing. And, one of the first solos I transcribed by ear was Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And, I kind of worked that out over a few weeks and, at the beginning stages. And then from there, that was like a stepping stone to really start learning how to play the blues and getting into guys like Eric Clapton, Johnny Winter, Hendrix, Jimmy Page, and, my ultimate hero, which is Stevie Ray Vaughan, which I only got into, I suppose, a little bit later on in the game, maybe 2 or 3 years after discovering all these other guys. And yeah, it's been a wild journey. And I mean, I'm 42 years old now, and I mean, that's when I was 12 years old, and it's crazy for me that the passion for the blues and music in general, playing the guitar, is as strong, or if not stronger than it was when I was 12 years old, man.
Yeah.
It's just never kind of waned at all, and it's just kind of grown and grown over the years.
Good to hear. And I guess as well, perhaps over the years, as you mentioned, you're 42 now. You look good for your age, by the way. So you look, I guess, to me, I thought you were in your 30s, but of course on Google it doesn't lie, does it? But I thought you were in your 30s, so there you go. But I think that as a guest, you've been in it for a long time now. You've probably seen that the industry has probably changed for the better or for the worse, maybe in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's been massive changes in the industry. There really, really has. Obviously the biggest change that I can now kind of, that comes to mind is streaming of music, which has its positives, and certainly it has its negatives. But it's obviously made it a lot more difficult to make a living out of music. But the positive is it's made your music instantly accessible to anyone in the world instantly. And you don't necessarily need a record label to have your music streamed worldwide.
Yeah.
So I think that would definitely be the positive. So where it's changed now is you can't rely on album sales anymore to make a living, because you just don't earn enough money in the world of streaming. It's just not something that kind of, well, not for me. I think if you streaming billions of streams a year, yes, maybe there's some money there, but being a niche, in a very niche genre, that certainly doesn't exist. So it's pushed making a living now solely on touring and playing live, which in many ways is great, because that's what I love doing more than anything is being on stage and performing live, performing in front of different audiences in different countries. It's a very, very special thing, but that's really where the industry's gone.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest change I've noticed, and where I've noticed it was maybe 10, 15 years ago when we released an album. The actual merch sales at a show on an album, on album launch night, if you're selling CDs and vinyls or your music, the sales were massive on those nights because people were into physical products still. Where I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years, that has dipped dramatically. Which is sad, but it's where the world is, and you either adapt to it or you die, I suppose.
Yeah, can't disagree with that at all. I guess as well because you've been in the music industry now for a long time, and when you were starting to get exposure, did you ever expect to be reaching people across the world as when you set out when you began? You could have bet when you first began. I bet you just wanted to reach people in your own country of South Africa. Did you ever thought you'd be able to reach people in other countries, let alone being able to perform in those countries in front of the fans from those places?
I mean, you never ever think you're going to get there, and I completely agree with what you're saying. It's like your focus when you start out is just like, let me just get like 10 people into this venue I'm playing tonight,
Yeah.
right? Just to kind of, anyone just to play to, and I don't think you even think as far as reaching the UK, the States, or anywhere else on the entire globe. In those days, the only way you could even perceive doing that was to be, on a worldwide record label with, worldwide network, and be highly successful, with a particular album. That was tough. It was a really, really tough thing. So for me, that's why there is certainly an upside to, the internet, streaming platforms, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, is because it doesn't matter who you are, you can really expose yourself to the entire planet without having to rely on a label, without having all these other factors that used to be factors back in the day. But it's amazing. It really is amazing to me that I get the opportunity to come to the UK and perform a bunch of dates across the UK, and get to go to the Netherlands and Germany and anywhere. It's a crazy thing, and it's still a very, I suppose, exciting thing for me, especially when I'm touring to a brand new place that I haven't I've never played before. It's a special thing.
Hopefully you may get a chance to do some bit of touring as well on your trip to places you've never been before as well, instead of just coming over just to perform and going to the next town and then so on and so on. And hopefully you get a bit of time to check out each city and each town as you're crossing through.
And that's like always the sad thing I find with touring, especially when it's back to back, is that you generally see the inside of whatever venue you're playing, the inside of whatever hotel you're staying, and then the motorway, right? Like when you're kind of leaving that city and going to the next one. And it's quite rare to have time to really experience a city properly, have a couple days off. And, it always works out the same way. We always have days off in the same cities. So we've already seen that city, we've experienced it, and we always have days off. And it's just the way, I suppose, touring works. But it would be lovely to really kind of, get to know a particular town on a far deeper level and see it besides just the venue.
Yeah, exactly. And even get used to the culture as well. Like maybe even bring that into your music somehow as well.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. It would be a fantastic thing to be able to do.
Yeah, well, hopefully in the future you get the chance to do so, because then, your music might change for that particular location you go into, or whatever, or you might reminisce about a certain place you loved and sing about that or something of that nature.
Exactly. So much inspiration, man. Yeah, you're right.
There you go. Talk to us about, because everybody is now wanting to know this. They've been waiting for 20 odd minutes for this. So talk to us about the time when you got to open up for the one and only, the legend, as I call him, the legend, Bruce Springsteen. What was that like?
Wow, believe it or not, that was 10 years ago. I mean, it felt like it was yesterday, but it was
mind-blowing.
It was, I know, it's crazy. But it was, obviously like a massive milestone moment in my life and career. And, it's one of those experiences that you will, remember on your deathbed.
Yeah.
You really, really will. It's, Bruce generally doesn't have support acts, I believe. So it was quite a rare thing to kind of get on the bill and be a support for that show. but it was unbelievable. There was 84,000 people in this giant stadium.
Wow.
You know, by far the biggest audience I've ever played for in my life, and probably the biggest I ever will play for in my entire life as a blues artist.
Never say never. Never say
Yeah,
never.
never say never. But it was unbelievable. You know, I didn't get to meet Bruce before the show, but you know, Tom Morello from Audio Slave and Rage Against the Machine and all those guys, he was actually on tour with Bruce on that particular tour.
Wow.
And it was incredible. So I think we had a 45-minute slot. It was, you know, the first song was quite taxing on the nerves. You kind of settle in. You know
Yeah.
why it's taxing? It's, you know, it's always when you're a support act.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you hyper aware that no one's there to see you.
Yeah.
which is you know, it's quite scary because, you know, you can't just get that up there and play. You got to kind of try and win the audience over.
Yeah.
And try and make some of them fans, you know. So, you know, that's kind of going through your mind. You got the sea of people. But then, you know, after the first song, we kind of relaxed into it and it was like, oh, we got this. It's, you know, first song we got a good reaction. Great. And then we kind of, all of us, our bodies relaxed and we started getting into it. And then I made the fatal mistake of looking into the wings of the stage.
Oh, no.
On my right hand side, and there was Bruce Springsteen standing there with Tom Morello.
Yeah.
You know, kind of both with their arms crossed, watching the set. And obviously, that didn't do wonders for my nerves or the band's nerves. 'Cause
No.
like you straight back up to like being tense and tight again. But you know, eventually you kind of get used to that too, and then you kind of settle back in. And it was a fantastic set. We really settled into it, and you know, I gained here in South Africa a lot of fans from that because you know, there was 84,000 people in the stadium. And you know, I never forget, we finished the set, and as I was walking off the stage, there was a little kind of steel staircase going off the stage, and a hand kind of, as I got to the bottom of the stairs, a hand popped out, and I just shook it, and I looked up, and it was Bruce Springsteen, and he was just a wonderful guy, man. I can't tell you the humility and he was just a regular, fantastic human being. He was really, really unbelievable. And he really made us feel welcome on the tour. I literally only got to speak to him for about 3 minutes, and then he had to leave and start getting prepped for, you know, his show, which he ended up, I think, performing for about four hours.
Wow.
Or something like that, which was incredible to see. But you know, Edward, all round it, that's why I say it's like something you'll remember on your deathbed. It was a milestone thing and just a supreme pleasure doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get to be one of the few people to say that I performed for Bruce Springsteen on his own show.
Yeah, you know, it's I'll take it.
Well, it's true. It's out there, so why not? Yeah, 'cause I bet there's not many people can say that, can they? Really, that they got to perform for Bruce Springsteen on his own show. You know, so you should be very honoured with that, and I'm glad that you're able to turn a lot of people to become fans of your work as well, which is great to see. And is there anybody you would want to collaborate with this year, maybe, to you know, bring new artists into your fan base and vice versa?
Well, you know, I think there's a bunch of artists that I would love to collab with. You know, especially, you know, in the world of blues and blues rock. I mean, I think Joe Bonamassa is someone who I've been a big fan of, you know, for years, and still am a big fan. You know, I'd love to, you know, to play with him one day. You know, even if it's just a tune. And I mean, geez, it's a weird question because as soon as I get asked that, I can't remember one artist that I like.
Your mind goes blank, doesn't it?
Like,
when you get put under pressure.
I don't like anyone, you know. But you rest assured, there's a bunch of people out there. Eric Gales is another one that I just really look up to. I mean, there's so many artists I look up to. In fact, for me, that's my biggest source of inspiration, or other artists.
Yeah.
It's you know, I think a lot of people draw inspiration from, as we spoke about earlier, you know, being in a particular city, love this, that, the next thing, you know. But for me, I mean, that's all inspiring, and I can certainly draw from it. But for me, the biggest inspiration are other artists that I look up to. And that really always lights the fire internally into me. If I'm in a writing mode, I'll listen to, great songwriters. If I'm now touring an album, I'll listen to great players and great performers to kind of get that inspiration going.
Cool to see. So, I guess, what are your goals then for this year as well? Obviously, to have a successful UK tour. I'm guessing you've already had a very successful South African tour. So, what else is on your bucket list to hopefully achieve this year?
Well, I think especially after COVID, it's really to play as much as possible, and to get to as many different countries as possible this year, and obviously to continue growing that fan base. So I would love to do a lot more European festivals, blues festivals this year. I always find those really a pleasure to play, and a great way to kind of expose your music to people who don't know it yet.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing for the cards for this year. But when I say playing as much as possible, it's just such a passion of mine, and as I mentioned earlier, it's such a the passion grows year by year and year, and all I want to do is just really be on a stage and perform. So, I want to play as many countries as I possibly can, and I just want this album really to kind of, I suppose, spread its legs and wings around the world, and introduce people to my music. I think that's
absolutely,
really
I completely agree with you, and I fingers crossed you get to reach as many different people in many different countries and counties, I guess, as well. If you don't mind, this might throw you off here a bit, maybe, I don't know, but as we saw from the photo, have you seen the photo I shared on Instagram and on Facebook and whatever else? I know it's on the YouTube thumbnail. You see that my guest Dan has some tattoos, and I'm just curious to know the story behind some of your tattoos you've got.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's also a great question. I think I got my first tattoo when I was 16. Illegally. I lied about my age.
Oh, now he's admitting it, so you might get lost if coming now.
Yeah. Lied about my age.
Don't do that, kids.
Yeah, don't do that. Bad idea. Don't follow in my footsteps. And I had to hide this tattoo from my parents for many years, until I went into a hospital for some sort of procedure. And the doctor was examining my stomach, because it's on my stomach, on my hip, and I could see my parents' eyes. They're like went as wide as saucers when they looked at this thing, and I was kind of busted from that point. But for me, it's the tattoos, the rest of them, because I do have quite a few. They really are, I suppose, little flag posts for different times in my life. These tattoos, I've been probably, this was like 25 years ago when I got my first tattoo, even longer. And every few years you get another little piece added on, this, that, the next thing. So they really remind me of particular times in my life, particular phases I was going through in my life. And to be honest, I regret none of them. I know a lot of people when they get to their 40s say, "Oh, I wish I didn't get any of these," but I regret absolutely none of them. I've slowed down now. I haven't been tattooed for close to 10 years now, but they've all got. It's just about particular times in my life, And there's a lot of music kind of and guitar related stuff, like a guitar on this arm, the word tone on my fingers, and a bunch of other stuff. And obviously there's stuff that has absolutely no meaning at all. I just liked the look of it and kind of got them to pop it on, man. So wow. There's a whole mixed bag on my body. Yeah.
Well, I would say they all mean something to you, and that's the most important thing.
Yes, definitely, without a doubt.
So before we let you go, of course we are coming up to the time of what you said to me off air. So I will respect your time. So of course you're in South Africa. You're the first South African, I believe, to come on my show. So thank you for making history today, for being for doing that. I want to know who would you suggest to come on my show next, because I don't know if your people sent you some of my work. I don't know if they did or not, but I'm just intrigued to know if you've ever seen my show before today.
I haven't, unfortunately, and they did send me a bunch of your episodes and all that sort of stuff, but it was sent at possibly the worst time ever.
Because you're on tour,
in the middle of a tour.
Yeah,
and
so don't blame you for that.
It was absolute chaos. But man, I'm so glad I made it on, and I must say I've really enjoyed it, man. I think you ask great questions, and I don't think everyone's got that ability, to ask the right questions.
Well, thank you very much, because I do try and keep it fresh and not ask the same questions which you may get repeated on other podcasts or interviews. So that's what I try to do. Try not to ask the same questions. Try to think outside the box. So I like to keep my guests, I guess, as well on their feet, because some people you keep me on my feet, because even I don't know what the question is going to be until we speak. So I guess that's something natural, I guess, about that nature as well. But I mean, is there anybody you would suggest to go on the show after yourself, Dan?
Well, I think there's a guitarist singer based out of the UK called Lawrence Jones. He's a fantastic musician, a guy I've known for years. Really interesting story too. His life story and just fantastic. I think he would be a fantastic guest on your show.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think he would be as well. I do know who you're on about, and it would be great to have him on the show as well at some point. So I will try to make that happen. Could be quite a fun episode, as you say, because he's quite a great guy and he's got some fantastic music like yourself. Before we let you go here, we want to remind people that you can buy Dan's new album, Moving On. It's been out since the 1st of March this year. So where can people help you and support you by getting that album? Where can they get it from?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. So right now, the focus of physical product, and don't get me wrong, it's not only this, but it's mostly at our live show. So we'll be touring when we're in the UK. We'll be touring with vinyl and CD of the new album, plus back catalog stuff and some other stuff too. I think that's the main source of buying physical products. But I know there's HMVs are stocking the vinyls and CDs too, and a bunch of other places. But I think if you go to danpatlansky.com, that would be probably a way better source and a way more reliable source of information than what I'm spewing out right now.
Fair enough. But one thing we can spew out, which is correct, because we got the graphic on my screen. If you're just on YouTube, you can see the course. It kicks off on April the 5th, right here in Manchester, UK, the best city in the world for music. And I hope you have a fantastic tour, of course, for the launch of your new album, Moving On. And it starts on April the 5th in Manchester and ends on the 20th of April in Hungary. So what a great tour. Starts in Manchester, finishes in Hungary. What a great guy. And we should mention as well, before you go, that we have been showcasing your social media throughout the episode on YouTube. So if you want to find my guests, you can find them on Facebook, also on X, even though you're not really posted on there since 2023 apparently, and on Instagram as well. You can find my guest where he's more active on Facebook and Instagram. But what's going on with the X?
I don't know. It's just been a platform that's never really kind of spoken to me. It's like it seems very political and all that kind of stuff. So, I'm pretty weak on the social media front, and being a social media guy, I'm always being kind of shouted at that I'm not doing it enough. So yeah, I mean, it's you know, I think it's a miracle that I'm even doing Instagram and Facebook, you know. Yeah, maybe I should jump back onto X and just kind of make it a little bit more of an effort there.
Fair enough. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I hope that we can keep in contact, and I hope I can have you back on the show again soon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and again, I hope that the UK tour for you is very successful and enjoyable, and I hope everybody from the UK, from us Brits, come out to show our support for your music while you're over here.
Well, thank you, Edward, and thanks for your time, man, and hope some of your listeners come to the shows. It'll be fantastic to meet them.
Yes, absolutely. Same here. And until the next episode drops, if you enjoyed tonight's episode, make sure to smash that like button here on YouTube. Share the video around. Tell more about Dan. Tell more about his love for blues music, his love for Bruce Springsteen as well. Not very often we get to say that word on this show. And of course, if you want to leave a future question for Dan, leave it in the comment section below, and I'll make sure to ask it on my next interview with him, whenever that will be. And if you're new around here and you like the content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. We've got over 237 subscribers. Until the next episode drops, enjoy the rest of your day.